Nubia has decided to take a risk and has presented several very specialized mid-range devices. In this case, we talk about the Nubia Focus Pro specialized in photography. Join me to know it in full. Usually when the distributor is Telcel, the prices are not going to be very economical, but I believe that the device can compete in a good way, especially because it has decided to specialize 100% in the camera, and in a few moments I will tell you about the special features it has for this. It seems to me that it can compete well in this price range, even in the price range in which Telcel distributes it, so come with me to know it. Let's start by talking about the design on the front, where we will not find some level of Gorilla Glass protection. In that sense, it comes to disappoint a little. And in this case, we are talking about a device that looks modern enough. Reduced bezels. The lower bezel is the one that is a little more accentuated. But overall, it is a device that does look attractive in this front design. However, we do wish it had some level of Gorilla Glass protection. On the right side, there is an important element, which is a switch. This switch will not be to manage the sound mode of the device as we might think, but it will allow us to directly open the camera. And this is obviously considered a quick shortcut that gives you a much more advanced user experience. In addition to this switch, we will find the on-off button with a red accent. And we will also find a kind of touch trigger that has the camera symbol on it, which is going to serve as a shutter. This is something very important also as part of the experience of the device, as it will allow you to take pictures on a level that other devices in this range don't allow you to. Obviously, it's a touch button, so it doesn't have different levels of pressure for focusing and more advanced things that you would find on premium devices that specialize in photography. But it's a very attractive thing to see this kind of element in a mid-range device. In fact, you can use this switch not only for the camera, but in a moment in the software section, I'll tell you about other functions you can use with this switch. On the top side, there is only a microphone, while on the left side, we will find the SIM card tray. Remember that in this case, if you buy it with Telcel, this tray will come with the second slot blocked, but if you buy it with other distributors, you will be able to place 2 nano SIM cards. On this left side, we will also find the volume buttons, and all this is in a frame that is plastic with a little plastic look. Which is plastic with a slightly metallic look. But obviously we are not talking about premium materials used in this device. And taking advantage of this profile view, I tell you that it is 8.5 millimeters thick, meeting the standard of devices in this price range. And at the bottom we will find another microphone in addition to the USB-C port and the speaker. But the back is the one that looks much more attractive still, considering it's a mid-range device. It definitely looks as if it were a more expensive device with an even more powerful camera. And in this case, we are not talking about such an advanced photographic system. The main camera will be the standout, but the rest of the cameras don't draw too much attention. However, the design does give a very professional touch. In addition, the back cover is made of synthetic leather, with another highlight in red, which also gives it a very nice touch. The dual tone finish of this back cover also makes it look like very similar to a camera. There are 2 options though. In this case, I have the beige color edition, but it is also available in black color. The device weighs 222 grams, and definitely that on an aesthetic design level, it's very nice, because you immediately realize that it is a device that is indeed focused on photography. It doesn't have any special level of resistance, so in resistance it's a bit lacking, but remember that we're talking device, so we couldn't get too demanding on this. The screen is 6.72 inches, so we are in front of a very good sized panel. Traditional ratio 20:9 with a full HD plus resolution 2400 by 1080 pixels, so it gives us a good level of detail. In total, it's 392 pixels per inch, so text and images will look considerably sharp even though it's a display. LCD technology, which means that you will have a good display if you have the content in front of you, but from the side it is likely that the brightness is reduced significantly, so you will not be able to have such a good display when you want to share content. A good view when you want to share content with friends. But if you plan to use this device a bit more personal, you're going to have a good experience. Also, the screen is 120 Hz, so it shows very smooth transitions and animations. In that sense, it's fine and can adapt automatically. The manufacturer does not provide any information about the brightness of the screen or other things, but at the software level, we find a layer very similar to that of ZTE. Then we have this same distribution. There is the dark mode, the reading mode with a grayscale mode. There is also the night mode, which is the blue light filter. So all these modes are going to serve you to have a much more comfortable experience. In fact, in the night mode, note that there is an option to reduce the white point. That is, it will allow you to further lower the brightness of the screen, giving a very comfortable feeling when using this device at night. In this sense, I think we could find one of its strongest points, as this option is not common to find in other devices. It also allows you to adjust the color temperature of the screen, so in all software senses I think it complies very well. Even though it's not such an attractive display at the hardware level, but for a good number of users it will be a good experience viewing the content from the front. Let's talk now about the sound, since in this case it only integrates mono sound, that is, it has a single speaker at the bottom, so it disappointed a little in this case. Not all devices in this price range have stereo sound, but it was something we would have liked to see in this device as well. But it's clear that it's not going to offer us an exaggeratedly high volume or a very important presence of bass frequencies. Join me to listen to a small test, but remember that it is not the same to listen to it live. And at the software level comes complemented with DTS sound, where unfortunately we will not find an equalizer, but we do find some audio profiles, where there are presets to select that you are listening to music, movies or games. And it has some selectors that might help you to equalize your sound a little bit, but it could not be formally considered an equalizer. That is to say, you can boost the bass, mid-range or treble. So let's say it's a 3-band equalizer, but you can't modify the gain levels. So it is a simple adjustment of the sound, but it can be useful. And please note that it has no headphone jack. I think this is one of the most notable absences that could come to suffer several users. Since in this price range it is still somewhat usual to see devices with headphone jack, but here you will need to use headphones through the USB-C port, or Bluetooth headphones. And in the case of Bluetooth headphones, you could use the SBC codec, which is the most basic, also the AAC. And the remarkable thing here is that it does support the LDAC codec, which is much higher quality and more expensive headphones. So at least they do offer this feature. And with respect to the microphones, remember that it has two, one on the bottom and one on the top, so it does support stereo sound recording. Let's listen to a little test.
Esta es una prueba de audio con el Nubia Focus Pro, que tiene dos micrófonos, uno en la parte de abajo y otro en la parte de arriba, con lo que sí puede captar sonido estéreo.
So voices are obviously going to be picked up clearly enough without being a specialist, but it is in its price range. Next, we will see a video recorded with this device in a very noisy environment to review how it behaves here. Definitely not a device that is disastrous in this. There is minimal distortion, but it is also noticeable that it is not excellent quality audio. But in this price range, we couldn't get more picky on this. The front camera is 32 megapixels with f2.5 aperture and fixed focus. And as I was telling you, from the design section, it has a physical switch where you can quickly open the camera, so it's pretty good. The device looks more or less agile when taking pictures without being an expert. It does not have a burst, so in selfies I would not say it is a specialist. It also integrates a beauty mode, but it is simple, with a single option with levels from 0 to 7. It also includes a button to load color filters that you can preview in real time. And regarding the capture options, in this case it incorporates only smile detection, but it does not integrate palm detection. So I think the selfie experience should improve a lot if this device wants to stand out as a specialized photography device. This front camera gives a good photo result, although I must say that it does not represent the 32 megapixels it claims to have. It looks more like an interpolated 4 megapixel camera because it doesn't really show off that much detail. It's a 28mm camera, so it's not that wide, although if you stretch your arm to the max, you might get a little better framing with a group of friends. But remember that with fixed focus, if you're too close to the camera, you could be out of focus. In intense backlit scenes, the preview does not look optimized. However, after processing the photo, I think the result is good, considering the level of backlight we were in. It balances the highlights and shadows well, so the result is nice. In indoor scenarios, we also have a positive result, although in the darker areas there is a bit more grain, but considering the price range, I think the result is nice. Considering the price range, I think the selfies are of good quality, and at night the result of the selfies will also be positive. I think we have a good level of detail as long as you are in front of a good light source. If you're backlit, the result may not be as attractive, but I still think it balances light and shadow well. And note that you can also take portrait shots. In the evenings we have an acceptable result, but in the daytime we confirm that it is a simple device which is not able to detect well the objects in the foreground. In addition to some overexposed areas will appear in this photograph, then it has a low dynamic range for this front camera in portrait mode. On this back we will find the 18mm ultra-wide camera with 5 megapixels on its sensor, f2.2 aperture. And the curious thing is that it has autofocus. So yes, it is going to allow us to take macro shots at the same time. This is something remarkable because in this price range, almost no device integrates something like this. The next camera is 24mm, considered as the main camera, which offers 108 megapixels with f1.75 aperture, autofocus and optical stabilization. This camera is very important because it has a recent generation sensor that will allow you to apply some cuts. That is, it can also give you photographs of 35mm or even up to 72mm while maintaining optical quality, something that in the price range will also be remarkable. So it is a very good camera. And the last camera is just a 2 megapixel depth of field camera with f2.4 aperture and fixed focus, so don't pay too much attention to that one. Pay little attention to that one. Like any mobile device, its preview has some level of lag. In testing, we found that this device doesn't have a super fast capture speed in terms of response, but I think it's within the average of what we would expect. In the interface, we will also find a button to load the color filters I had shown you, and something curious is that it expresses you the focal lengths in the zoom settings. And if you click on the 24mm setting, you can switch to a slightly closer setting, as I say, while maintaining optical quality. Or you can make the jump to 72mm, also maintaining optical quality. If you tap on the screen, you can adjust exposure and focus as usual, and it also has an expert mode where you can adjust the exposure speed, which can go up to 30 seconds, also the ISO, which can go up to 3200, and other parameters such as white balance, focus, compensation, and even an interval capture. You can also enable a histogram so you can have more information for professional photography. But the curious and unforgivable thing in a device that wants to focus on photography is that it doesn't have a raw photography mode. Hopefully this can be corrected with an update because it is something necessary if the device wants to be characterized as a photo specialist. What is integrated is a mode called Scenes, which comes with some custom color filters, also gives you a little more information on the settings you are using to adjust the photo, but it does not go beyond that. This device allows us to take 108 megapixel pictures, but you don't really appreciate such an exaggerated level of detail, especially since it's not a picture with that much contrast. It is perceived a little simple in this aspect. So I think that the high resolution mode is not as attractive as in the high end, but in this price range, I think it can deliver good quality. And in motion scenarios, the ultra-wide camera, I think it behaves well, the main one in the acceptable, although faster movements will appear with a ghosting effect. In fact, curiously, when there are motion scenes, it seems that the 72mm setting is not able to maintain optical quality. Note that outdoors, the ultra-wide camera looks low contrast and will obviously have a low level of detail. The main camera improves a lot in this aspect, having a more detailed picture with more contrast, even with more color. Although note that in this case the outdoor photography was on a cloudy day, so the colors are not as intense. And by the way, the device, in addition to the ultra-wide camera, allows us to use the panoramic mode in case you want to have the same quality of the main camera in a wider scene. You can definitely achieve attractive results in terms of breadth and level of detail. Here you are looking at the picture at the 72mm setting, where it seems to me that it does manage to maintain optical quality. The result is really very good. In this price range, I don't think there is going to be another device that offers this level of quality at this zoom setting. But just to give you a clearer reference of the zoom quality, in this case, you are looking at the main camera picture. Now at 72mm, where I insist that the quality holds up very well, and notice that the 5x zoom photograph also maintains a good level of detail. Although it doesn't have as much dynamic range, so you will notice some overexposed areas. But even at the maximum zoom, which is 10x, it maintains a good quality. Obviously, you can tell it's digital zoom, but for the price range, it's a really very good zoom, and I think this is one of its strongest points. In an indoor setting, the ultra-wide camera suffers tremendously, although again, it's an overcast day, so there was a little less illumination than normal. But definitely the difference is very big with the main camera. In this case, the main camera does improve the level of detail tremendously. Although the colors aren't quite as accurate, but that's okay. Even with the 72mm setting, I think it has a good quality, although it doesn't seem to maintain as much quality as outdoors. In a backlit scenario, the preview doesn't look as optimized, and remember that it needs to detect the face. So if it doesn't detect the face, it's not going to give much priority to illuminating it. In these kinds of conditions, with the ultra-wide camera, you're going to have some areas of chromatic aberration that aren't that nice, but for the price range, it's fine. The main camera, I insist, did not detect the face, so it focused on illuminating the brightest areas well, but the dark areas come out very dark. With the 72mm setting, it did detect the face well, and therefore, the result is much more balanced in lights and shadows. At night, the ultra-wide camera may suffer more than it should. Also remember that as the cameras are behind a fairly large glass, you can get to have these reflections a little more uncomfortable. But the main camera, honestly, I found it to be very good at night photography. It balances the highlights and shadows very well, keeps them well lit, no noise. Well illuminated, no noise. So the result is really very good. If you use the night mode, there's not going to be that much difference, so the quality is very similar. And with the 72mm setting, you're going to notice something very similar again between auto mode and night mode. In fact, the night mode is going to lose a little bit more contrast, so it's recommended more with the auto mode. And in scenes where there is much less illumination, watch the preview so you have a reference of the level of darkness. And from auto mode, do a long exposure to gain more illumination. And the result is positive. With night mode, it does pretty much the same thing. It doesn't have as much detail level, but I like how it recovers colors quite well. So I think for the price, it's fine. For macro photography, the main camera performs very well. It gives us an excellent level of detail, although you can't get that close. And remember that the focus is very spot on. There are some other areas that will appear out of focus despite being close. So yes, you have to be very specific. But if you apply zoom 3x with 72mm, the result seems to me to be very good for this kind of scenes. Although remember that you could also use the ultra-wide camera, which has autofocus for this type of scenario, and again the picture will be of good quality. I think for macro photography it's a good contender. In fact, it allows you to zoom in with the ultra-wide camera, but because it's only 5 megapixels, you don't really keep the zoom as detailed. But you could have these photographs. And the portrait photography is also very good because it does keep the foreground objects in focus, having an excellent level of detail. In this sense, I was delighted with the result. I just wish it would allow us to take pictures from different focal lengths as they allow in automatic mode. But in portrait mode, you are limited to using only the 24mm setting, although I insist that the result is quite nice. And just as a curiosity, it also includes a mode capable of maintaining some specific colors, very similar to what Motorola offers us. And also another one that allows us a color change, although we must be careful because the result could be disastrous. You can record video in 4K with the main camera, something that is definitely very outstanding for this price range. When recording video, you are going to have a button to take pictures. It also has a button to pause and resume your recording, and a slider for zooming, although it doesn't have some quick presets for moving at different distances. It does have a button to turn on the flashlight without the need to stop your recording, and the curious thing is that it has different levels from 1 to 7, something we almost never see in devices. And in this case, curiously, it also integrates a professional video recording mode, although we already know that it does not have as many parameters or options as we could find in flagship devices. But it stands out that it is present. The video will definitely be very simple. Sorry to disappoint you, but the video recording is pretty bad. It goes at a very low bitrate, therefore the movements look very poorly defined. While the color is acceptable, the rest of the parameters I think are very simple in this device and confirm us that despite being very good at photography, within the acceptable in its price range, in video it is definitely not. The ultra-wide camera indoors has a fairly low illumination. There is more noise present than we would like and poorly defined objects. The main camera improves a bit in this aspect, but it is not an excellent performer either. So, it is not a device that I recommend for video recording, and let me keep confirming it. Since the stabilization is really very bad, although it has optical stabilization, it is not enough to have a good experience recording videos in action scenes. The ultra-wide camera manages to capture a little better this kind of movements due to its wider perspective, but the vibration is still very noticeable. While it does have some level of simple stabilization, it's not really enough. So whether you're walking or running, it's not enough to have a good experience. The ultra-wide camera, maybe with this mode enabled, manages to balance this kind of scenes a bit better, but it's not something recommended. And in the higher stability mode, it still seems that if you're walking, something good comes out, but if you're running, it still feels like a bit of a messy video. The focus will also be very bad. So it confirms that it is a device that is not really recommended for recording. It takes a long time to adjust. Even in aggressive movements, and therefore in slightly more subtle movements, the focus can become frozen. Definitely not acceptable or recommended, and recording against the light will also give us a bad result. In general, we will notice very aggressive jumps in exposure depending on whether or not it detects the face. It is not recommended to record in these scenarios. Both with the ultra-wide camera and with the main camera, we have very similar results. It is recommended to record with the light from the front, but here the result does look very simple. And at night, unlike in photography, it does not have a good result. Again, the dark areas come out exaggeratedly dark. The slightly more illuminated areas come out overexposed, giving a very bad result. It also has no slow motion, and it does have fast motion, but its simplest setting is 15x. It also has a low level of detail, so I wouldn't recommend it for people's movements. Maybe if you leave it on a base, to record some landscape is fine because it reaches up to 1800x where the result could become more attractive, but it is definitely one of the few redeemable in the video recording of this device. And the front camera has practically the same performance. That is, it has no stabilization, has inaccurate colors, has a low dynamic range, so I do not recommend you to record with this camera. I insist, in photography it still manages to defend itself in a good way, but not in video. Remember that it has fixed focus, confirming that parameter by parameter is very simple. Indoors maybe it gets to have a little better recording because the lighting is a little more balanced and more even. So if you're shooting indoors, it could still be a good thing, but if you need to be very static and with good lighting, and at night there's definitely going to be a lot more noise. You need to shoot in a scene where you do have the lighting in front of you to have the best possible result, but everything else will appear quite dark. We confirm that this is a very simple result. It won't offer us slow motion or fast motion here at the front, let alone a dual recording mode or anything more advanced. Regarding the software, this device integrates MyOS in its 13th version running on Android 13. This is clearly a disadvantage because it does not offer us a recent software, plus it does not have a clear update policy, so I do not think that this device will receive a good treatment in this regard. At the customization level, it includes some simple themes, but it does not have a more advanced store that allows you to download new themes. What we could highlight is the super lock feature that will dynamically change your wallpapers, in this case exclusively using landscapes fortunately, so that feature you could get to use. It also integrates a function called Active Island that is like the dynamic island of the iPhone, that is when you plug in the charger. For example, it's going to show you a little animation, which is also going to be similar when you are using the voice recorder application or some timer, or even when you connect some Bluetooth headphones. So it can be an interesting add-on, although in this case it is simple, it does not offer you more interaction inside or something similar. As I anticipated, you can also customize the action of the switch that brings physical level. By default, it comes to open or close the camera, but you can also select that you can control the sound or also to turn on and off the flashlight quickly or finally for the voice recorder. So it has good options, although it does not allow you to choose a specific application. It also brings the traditional gestures that several other cell phones have. From this system, I always like to highlight the gesture to shake the device when you are on the lock screen to turn on the flashlight. It also has the Z-Pop function, which is a small floating ball that gives you more options. It's something that not all manufacturers offer, and interestingly also a feature to avoid unwanted touches on the edges of the screen. You can completely customize how you want this touch rejection to be. Touch rejection. This device does not support opening apps in window, but it does support split screen in case you were in doubt. Overall, the system seems to be pretty simple. It doesn't have a lot of added options, it's not going to get a lot of updates, and it has a hardware level Z-axis optical drive that is not so well exploited in software. So also the vibration will be simple. Let's talk now about security. We'll find a side fingerprint reader located on the on-off button that supports up to 5 different registrations, so it does well within its price range. It's going to respond well. Generally, always these readers have a good response. It also integrates simple facial recognition. I never emphasize this feature because it doesn't offer an advanced level of security, so I only recommend using it for convenience. But for that, I always recommend more to use Google Smart Lock, where you can register your locations, or some trusted devices where you want the device to stay unlocked. And speaking of Google features, it also integrates Google's password manager, so you can automatically fill out your passwords in other forms, although in this case note that it autofills the form, so it has a small vulnerability here. You have to be careful. In the settings, you can set it to ask for the fingerprint. It also integrates the My Vault feature, which is a combination of secure folder with application lock. Here in the vault, you can store photos, videos, files, apps, and even passwords, and all this will be secured by your fingerprint. So it offers good options, but for example, it does not integrate a child mode or more advanced locking, nor a private VPN or antivirus collaboration. In fact, you depend on Google Play Protect, which we all know is not so secure. And in other ways, you also depend on Google, like if you happen to lose your phone. Let's talk about the battery. This device has a capacity of 5,000 milliamps, like the vast majority of devices on the market today. Although it performed slightly less than I would have liked, it did achieve 3 hours and 18 minutes in the close-up drain test. For your reference, on average it should have lasted a little over 4 hours in this test, so it doesn't seem to be that efficient. And running this drainer in the background didn't improve too much either. It came in at 3 hours and 32 minutes. And despite appearing to have high power consumption, at the software level we noticed that the drainer running in the background was constantly shutting down. This for practical life can mean that you miss some notifications because the system is very aggressive closing apps in the background and still fails to have a good autonomy. Fortunately, it integrates a normal and everyday saving mode that can help you a bit to extend this duration, and it also has an ultra power saving mode, which could be very useful in emergency conditions, and I believe that you will have to use it at times because it is a device that is not able to offer a very good autonomy. The built-in charger in the box is 33 watts and it's going to offer us fast charging. Let me share with you my figures. In 15 minutes it charged up to 20%, in 30 minutes it charged up to 43%, and the full charge was completed in 93 minutes. Not bad, but we could not say that he is a specialist in this. Obviously, we could not ask for wireless charging or something more advanced for the price, but we would like to have some features to take care of the battery from wearing out too much, but it has neither smart charging or charging lock or anything like that. Let's talk about connectivity. This device integrates 5G, something that is definitely remarkable for the price range. There are other manufacturers that sacrifice other things in exchange for giving you 5G, but in this case it's nice to see this level of connectivity even though it doesn't come with some tool to lock data, certain applications. It also offers us support for Wi-Fi 5 networks, which is expected in this price range, and has Bluetooth 5.2, again not the latest, but I have come to expect it. In this case it does not have NFC, so you could not make mobile payments and the like, but it does have FM radio. And interestingly, it works without the need to connect headphones, something few devices can boast. Obviously, it also has OTG and can project its screen in a simple way as a mirror format, but only wirelessly, so via cable you won't be able to have this option. It also has Android Auto, and regarding sensors, it has accelerometer, geomagnetic field, orientation, gyroscope, light sensor, and a completely physical proximity sensor, and in fact it has many more sensors, so in that sense it doesn't disappoint at all. Let's talk now about the ecosystem where Nubia has a lot of work to do. It still has a very limited ecosystem where it depends 100% on Google and its technologies such as QuickShare or Google Fast. Then we could not talk about a big ecosystem from Nubia, even though it has some tablet and possibly some headsets out there, but they do not have advanced interaction. Cloud storage will also depend on Google, and its subscription plans and control of home devices will also depend on Google Home. We are now going to do the performance test, in this case incorporating the Unisoc T760 processor, a processor that is somewhat unknown and that many people will definitely be a little disappointed by the brand. However, it is a processor within the entire catalog of Unisoc that is at the top of the range. So it is not a processor as simple as you might expect. It comes with 8 GB of RAM that you can extend up to 12 GB of virtual RAM, although I do not recommend so much virtual RAM. As you realize, in this case it took 3.43 seconds on average to open each of the 16 applications. I think it's not bad, although obviously it will not be its most attractive point, but now that we have all these applications open, we tried switching between them, and there is no application restart, although it doesn't behave as agile when you are switching. But in general, we can say that if you could give you a good multitasking experience, the device could give you a good multitasking experience. Good multitasking experience, the device incorporates 256 gigabytes of storage, something that is definitely very good, although it does not have slot for micro SD card. And we don't have specific information on the version of the storage it has. So I guess it will be a storage that is not the fastest, but let's test it by exporting a video in 4K with several clips recorded with this device in 4K to test more or less what is the power that has this device in conjunction with the speed of the RAM Together with the speed of the RAM and the speed of the storage. As you can see, it took 52 seconds, proving that the most suitable will be to export videos in full HD. Let's talk about the games. In this case, at the software level, does not include a manager or additional tools. In fact, the experience is quite limited around this feature. In Call of Duty, this device by default gives the low quality graphics at a rate of frames per second average. Remember that it is not a device focused on gaming, so in this case does not have graphic compatibility, although it does allow us to go up to a medium quality at a high rate, but there are few effects available that you can use. However, in this case, the experience is going to be very good in the graphics configuration that supports. So it has very good stability. Practically, we could say that perfect, no significant low peaks or anything like that are appreciated. But this is because it does not offer very advanced graphics, so it has low graphical support. But if you do not care much play with simple graphics, if you're going to have a fairly smooth experience, then in this case, the weak point, let's say, that is the graphic quality, although the strong point is good stability. However, if you adjust this same graphics quality on other devices, is likely to also give you a good level of fluidity. We changed the Legends Auto setting to select the average graphic quality at 60 frames per second, and in this case, again, we had a very good experience, some very brief low peaks, and it didn't even go below 44 frames per second. So the remarkable thing is that it maintains a good level of stability. And it didn't even drop below 44 frames per second. So the remarkable thing is that it maintains a good level of stability. In fact, it also maintains a good temperature balance because it didn't even go above 40 degrees Celsius on this device. 40 degrees Celsius on this device. So we are going to have a good gaming experience, I insist, as long as you select appropriate graphic qualities, which in this case was a medium quality, which is also adequate for its price. Then you can play games with good looseness. In the case of SpongeBob, gives us by default the resolution and medium quality. We leave it at that setting, but we went up to 60 frames per second. And in this case, if it is compatible with gameplay, again, we're going to see a good level of stability, good enough for the range. Obviously, it's not a specialist in, but it does give you a pretty loose experience. And again, what I found for me was that it's not a loose. And again, what I liked about this device in terms of the gaming experience is that it didn't get overheated normally in this game. We see it get well over 40 degrees Celsius, but in this case in our test it got right down to 40 degrees Celsius, so it performs pretty well. And finally, in Henshin Impact by default, it is set to very low graphic quality. In this case, we went up to 60 frames per second, and we kept motion blur disabled, but in this case it is quite well behaved. Motion blur disabled, but in this case, even with this simple graphics setting, we didn't see that it had a very good response, especially in terms of stability, because the average was good with 50 frames per second. The average, if it was good, having 50 frames per second, but it did have significant fluctuations in the frames per second. So if you want a super stable game in this case, it is not going to give you so much power for that, but for much more casual games, it definitely has a good level of power. Overall, we will have a good average, as I say, so the experience, if it is smooth but not as stable, considering that it is a device that wants to focus more on photography, I think that the result is pretty good at the game level. As a conclusion, is a device that really meets the fact of focusing on photography. The switch and touch button are differential elements to give you an experience that not offered by other devices. Also, the zoom inside the sensor will help you to give a good quality at different focal lengths, so it's a device that focuses a lot on this. The rest of the things are average, but definitely photography lovers can have a good experience with it. For the moment, this has been all for this video. If you liked it, you know you can tell us, and see you next time.